Travelling in the footsteps of the successful author Rosamunde Pilcher to the locations of her novel adaptations is certainly a romantic experience. The English county of Cornwall is the setting for most of her often dramatic love and romance film adaptations. Let's start this extraordinary journey in the Straits of Plymouth Sound, with a crossing from Plymouth in the county of Devon to an offshore headland which is already a part of Cornwall. High above the cliffs of the bay lies the old stately country residence, Mount Edgcumbe House, which is one of the most beautiful in England. The manor house with its 4 side towers is a symbol of English country life. An imposing entrance hall welcomes visitors and reflects the elegance and status of the English nobility. Through emotional performances, the actors were able to bring the novel characters to life here. The living room on the ground floor boasts of valuable paintings and an open fireplace. And the large dining room with goblins and exquisite Regency furniture. Even the coffee room glows in Elizabethan style. And the library creates the impression that the Count or Countess is spending their reading hour here. And from time to time, take a look at the blooming garden. It is the splendour of the garden in full bloom which shows the fascinating life in the noble world of the high society. And on to the country park, which leads to the headland surrounded by the sea. The famous Shell Grotto in Earl's Garden is surrounded by exotic plants that are laboriously cared for by gardeners. The Maker Church from the 11th century will seem familiar as well. It is the church for Mount Edgcumbe Estate, dedicated to Mary and Julian. The next filming location, Polperro, can be described as a village out of a picture book. The picturesque harbour with the fishing boats served as a backdrop for the film The Carousel. Narrow alleys, steep stairs, white cottages and rustic pubs form an enchanting idyll with a long and compelling history. The smuggling of tobacco and brandy served as a source of income alongside sardine fishing. And the cellars of the small houses were ideal hiding places for goods and smugglers. But today, the tourists arrive in the village from the countryside and enjoy Mediterranean flair. King Henry VIII had reinforced the south coast of England to protect himself from invaders from the European mainland. Thus, at the entrance to the large bay of Falmouth, 2 opposite forts were built, one of which is St. Mawes Castle. With a central tower bearing the stone coat of arms of the king. On the upper floor in the rondo, you can see the embrasures with the large cannons that were pointing towards the sea. But St. Mawes surrendered unconditionally to the Roundheads of Oliver Cromwell, who attacked from the mainland. The mighty fortress with the impressive view of the opposite Pendennis Castle was several times a scenario for Pilcher movies. Successful films like Voices in Summer, The White Birds, or Prime of Life were shot here. At the end of the Fjord of Falmouth, at the mouth of the River Fal, is a large landscape garden. The Trellissic Garden is one of the most beautiful show gardens in Cornwall, with quiet paths and varied and lush flora. This mansion in the middle of the magnificent garden was an ideal backdrop for the film Voices in Summer. Also, the view from the terrace into the Bay of Falmouth and other locations in the surroundings helped to make the event a success. Further south is the Trebah Garden, which resembles a jungle. In 1830, the wealthy shipowner Charles Fox and his brother had the garden created, with exotic plants from all over the world. With waterfalls, old rhododendrons, tall palm trees, and ponds with climbing plants. The drizzle and morning ground fog created a seemingly impenetrable green. The enchanted garden was neglected and overgrown for a long time until Tony Hibbert reopened it in 1987. This 19-metre-high white lighthouse has already warmed and guided many sailors. It is a symbol of the rough and rugged headland of the Lizard Peninsula, untouched, pure nature, and at the same time, the southernmost point of England. This is also where the film of the Carousel was shot, as wind and surf accompanied the feelings of two lovers. The village of Brig is located in Mounts Bay after Helston, on the way to Penzance. A sleepy, romantic village with small stone houses and blooming flowers in the front gardens. Named after an Irish nun from the 5th century who came here with monks and founded a parish church. But the present granite church was not built until 1170 and named after St. Brig. The historic country estate Godolphin House belongs to the village of Brig, an estate which was formerly used as a farm and whose manor house is probably one of the most beautiful and interesting. Built at the end of the 17th century by the Godolphin family, who had prospered through their tin mines under King Charles II. It was not until 1937 that the Schofields acquired the rundown property and restored it to its former glory. adjoining country estate became a suitable elite hotel. For the film adaptation of the novel The Empty House, the estate became the country estate Kirkton of the cold and selfish Sir Anthony Keel. This is where the family's dramatic debates took place, and the informed visitor also recognises the rooms and original furniture. The hotel guests can enjoy all this aristocratic splendour and feel and sense the spirit of a long time gone. The large living room shows a chess table where the Earl, who was an excellent chess player, spent much time with selected opponents. Godolphin House is a successful example of how an old manor house with a long history can be brought back to life with the help of an owner. The garden behind the manor house fulfills the idea of cultivated and precisely ordered horticulture of that time. Within the coarse stone walls, magnificent flowers and bushes bloom under shelter. On the way to Land's End, embedded in a tiny bay, lies Mousel, one of the oldest fishing villages. Already in the early Christian era, a protective wall was built for the harbour, which became ever more important as a fishing port. The thick piers protect against the fury of the Atlantic. Grey granite houses form the frame of the harbour. In 1595, the place was burnt down by the Spaniards when they came ashore here. Once Mousel was also an important port for sardine fishing, as shoals of fish came close to the coast, and so fishermen did not have to go far out with their boats and wide nets. Caergwyn House, the oldest building from the 14th century, was the only one to survive the Spanish attack, although the owner was also murdered. Everything here seems like the calm before the storm, on the way to the next stop. Land's End is probably the most famous point of Cornwall. But at first, this is hard to understand, because the access consists of shops and usual forms of entertainment. After the hustle and bustle, suddenly the wild solitude of the rugged cliffs can be seen, and the pointed granite cliffs reaching far into the Atlantic Ocean. The westernmost end of the English world. Here, the dramatic end scene of the first Pilcher film, The Day of the Storm, was shot. A scene whose impression can rarely be surpassed. The old seafarers are said to have confused Cape Cornwall headland, which is located a little more to the north, with Land's End, which had terrible and often fatal consequences. The wild charm is similar, with only the frequent and unpleasant rush of tourists missing here. but loneliness and unspoilt nature rewards this. This region is also full of Pilcher traces, as the author was particularly fascinated by the mysterious past of this area. It was once thought that this was the westernmost point of England, but it's where the seas meet. Daphne du Maurier has also written about this passage in her Cornwall saga. St Ives is culturally and touristically the most famous of the western fishing villages on the Atlantic Ocean. The heart of Cornwall, and the main setting of most Pilcher novels, where it is fictionally called Porthkerries. The small town has attracted artists in particular with its Mediterranean light, and tourists followed. The parish church is dedicated to St Aya, who is buried here, and is located directly at the port. A hall church whose barrel vault is decorated with gilded wood carvings. Until her death, the small but fine Barbara Hepworth Museum was the studio and home of one of the leading artists of the 20th century. Of particular interest is the adjoining sculpture garden, where her works are still in the position in which the artist herself placed them. But one must not forget to mention that it was not only the craftsmen that made the place well known, but also famous English painters such as William Turner, James Whistler, or the German-born Walter Sickert. And the Barnoon Cemetery, which has also often been a filming location, is the oldest in the village and is located on the coast. The view of the sea is impressive, and the gravestones date from the 19th and early 20th centuries. Close to the small town of Padstow, located in a park, is one of the most beautiful Elizabethan mansions from the 16th century. Prideaux Place. Several international feature films have been shot here with famous stars, and also Pilcher movies like The End of Summer, A Special Love, or Coming Home. The Prideaux family has lived in this property for 14 generations. Walls with small battlements surround the property, behind which the defiant house front made of grey granite rises. The residence also includes a garden and wildlife park, where a herd of deer graze fearless and undisturbed. The garden is also often open, and visitors can stroll past the fountain on well-tended paths like nobles. Since, understandably, it's not allowed to film inside the house, the garden section with trellis plants invites you to take another tour. Further inland is Pencarrow House, a country house nestled in a large area of land. The long drive through the landscape park to the classicist country estate also leads past flowering shrubs and makes this trip an experience to remember. A first look at the house suggests history, but the way to the entrance still has to be found. For more than 200 years, the manor house has been run by the Molesworths and Obin family, who have opened 11 of their rooms to visitors. Even peacocks have found their habitat around the house and gave the name for the cafe. The garden is the result of 2 centuries of English landscape architecture, and particularly Cornish Victorian gardening. The rooms are not permitted to be filmed, but the interior is overwhelming. Close to Bodmin is Lanhydrock House in the river valley of the Foy, with a spectacular gatehouse and a walled front garden. A small museum introduces you with personal mementos of the family to history and time. After a fire in 1881, all the style characteristics of the Tudor period were restored. The large library or living room gives the impression that the noble family lives here. But the National Trust has taken over the administration, and so 51 rooms, some of which are magnificent, offer insights into the Victorian domestic culture of the wealthy landed gentry. Also behind the Lanhydrock House, a walled garden spreads out, whose antiquated style has been preserved. An open gate in the wall leads into the extensive flowering park area. A gardener's house and hidden springs in romantic surroundings make everything seem enchanted. And in addition, there are magnificent plantings of magnolias, camellias, azaleas or rhododendrons in artistically arranged beds. Bright colours and exotic scents try to court favour. In all the aristocratic residences that were visited, the wealthy, well-off lived, but there was also another life, that of the common people. And so we also visit Mousel Quay, an interesting river port with inn and library. From here, copper was shipped from nearby mines, by which some residents became the richest people in Queen Victoria's kingdom. Today, visitors are transported back into the past in this lively museum village. Magnificently blooming gardens and parks, impressive castles, stately homes, and wildly romantic coastal landscape. All these are the ingredients to the fascinating world of novels of Rosamunde Pilcher, who really knew how to use the magic of Cornwall.